Welcome to The Complete Musician, creativity at its core, exploring innovative musical ideas, thoughts, and techniques for the modern musician in today's society, with your hosts, James Nagus and Drew Phillips.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Complete Musician podcast, hosted by me and you.
And me.
You being him, not you being the listener. But you're part of it, too. You,
Him
the
being
listener.
me, as in Drew, and you being you, as in...
Wait, who's on first?
Oh, well, you haven't exactly said your name yet, but we could just make
It's
up
in
a
the
name
title
for you.
somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, no.
What should my name be today?
Let's see. We can call you, like, Ferdinand or something.
Ferdinand. Okay. Well, I'll have to think of that. I'll have to say it several times so I can memorize my new name.
Ooh, good segue, James.
Oh, wait. I thought I was Ferdinand.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
this is the Complete Musician podcast, and I interrupted you, and you had a what?
I was just going to say, I said the word segue. I had an English teacher once in high school who tried to convince our class that word, S-E-G-U-E, was pronounced segue. And I've never really understood where that came from. But anyway, so every time I say the word segue, I think about that.
The etymology of that word comes from the invention of that thing you stand on with two wheels.
Mm-hmm. And it's just as confusing to write it as it is to say it. And
Yes.
just as dangerous.
Indeed.
I've only ridden them like once, and I did not go very fast at all. I was terrified.
Yeah, I think I rode one in Epcot. But anyway, we're getting beside the point here.
Yes.
Today's episode of the Complete Musician podcast, we thought we'd talk about memorization. Just one topic for today, or at least one main topic for today. And it's something that has come up with both of us recently, but it's just one of those things, those, I guess, skills over time that should you do it? How do you do it? And that's what we're going to talk about. So the reason why it came to my mind initially is because every year we have a concerto competition at the school, and typically the requirement is that your music must be performed memorized. Now, there's exceptions that can be made, petitions that can be filled for pieces that have lots of notes, contemporary things. But for the most part, the long-standing tradition was that everyone memorized. Now, for piano and strings, I think there's a much stronger tradition there. But for brass, the question is, should we memorize? Is that reasonable? And what do we do about it?
I think that with that topic, it comes down to the tradition of it comes to the literature choice as well. Like you said, the contemporary stuff, you could make a bigger argument that we wouldn't or shouldn't have to use music. But if it's standard concerti and things that we all play, there can be an expectation.
Right. Yeah. So I guess we could take a step back. And first, let's just talk about the pros and cons of memorizing your music. So let's start with, and we can kind of just, I guess, popcorn around.
Yeah.
One of the pros is it gets you out of the page and allows you to focus just on the musicality of it without being stifled by seeing ink.
Right. And I think that you could also make the argument that at some point in any time that we're playing literature, we're basically memorizing to a degree anyway.
Yeah,
because
you're right.
we're not actually reading notes at some point. I mean, when we play our runs that we have in Mozart 2, we're not reading every little 16th note that we're playing on those E-flat scales when we play them upwards. We're just letting our fingers do all the work. So you can already say that memorization is a big part of learning the piece anyway. But yes, going back to your point, I mean, that goes into, like you said, you're getting yourself away from the notes, the actual ink on the page, and you're making it more of a muscle memory thing rather than a literacy thing, which is always musically advantageous.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting that you bring up the fact that we kind of memorize anyway. If you really think about it, when you're reading music, you're reading the notes in the moment while also reading ahead, while also being able to skip across lines, while also
I mean,
if we're
how do
doing
we
something
sight
like
read,
Mozart,
right?
we're transposing, so we're not even reading the notes that are on the page.
True.
So what are we doing?
I mean, it's like sight reading. Like you see it once, and then good sight readers, we move ahead. Like we're constantly a measure or two measures ahead when we're sight reading ahead. So what is the point of literacy, but what is the importance of like reading at sight anyway?
Right.
Because you don't really do it when we perform. Anyway, yeah, memorizing 100% gets us into more of the sound rather than the sight. And
yes,
the whole sound before or the hearing before seeing principle, huge educational philosophy that so many people have capitalized on and proves to be really, really advantageous for young students especially.
Yeah, for sure, especially when things are complex, like complex rhythms. It's much easier to learn that rote and spit it back. But
one advantage I can also think of that memorization is appearing in my life, not only with the concerto competition, because our school does the same thing, in which it's encouraged to be memorized, but you can make
and we'll come back
allowances.
actually to whether or not we feel that's valid, because
Right.
I mean, we both have thouts about that. I think there's a
Right.
tricky balance. But
We'll come back to it. Other than that, in my life, I'm coaching a trumpet quintet right now that is applying to, or is preparing to audition for the National Trumpet Competition. And that video has to be submitted in a couple months. And it is, from all of the groups that went into the semifinals and into the finals, all of them the ensembles had all their pieces memorized. They used no music.
And was that a requirement, or was that, like you said, a suggestion?
It was just suggested, but it's too much of a pattern to think, oh, this isn't, this isn't important. And going into that, the memorization with a group, we'll expand it, is better for communication. And even if you're playing with a collaborative pianist, communication with a pianist is easier if you're not having to worry about, I have to be so connected visually to the music on the stand.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be good for expressing your musical ideas to those you're playing with if you're not just by yourself. Then,
right.
memorization
Chamber
can
music,
be really helpful.
right.
Yeah, so that can be an advantage there, although we don't see that often unless it's something like a competition. Although, I mean, groups like Canadian Brass perform, entire...
They do both.
They do both, but, you see lots of videos where they're not using music.
And I think it's because they have kind of a mobile nature to their performance. They move around a lot. It would just be impractical
unless they had those wire stands, like
Can you imagine
the marching bands,
marching instruments and lyres, and
I want to see Jeff Nelson with his mellophone, like marching.
Although now, like, a lot of marching bands are doing iPhones.
It's true. All of my kids now have those little digital like things. Yeah, they hook their phone to it, and I'm like, what if your phone dies? What if you get a call? What if you accidentally
you
forget
better
to put
have it
on
memorized
sound?
then. See, there's another pro for memorization.
I would totally answer the phone on the field. We're in the second
do a
movement right
FaceTime
now. I
call.
can't talk.
Yeah.
I can't talk. Oh, and also, we just brought that up, but marching band. Marching band is a huge application of memorization. College marching band maybe not so much because they do have the lyres and now they're doing like the foam stuff, but DCI, absolutely not. And high school marching band, I don't know any high school marching band that goes to competition that doesn't march memorized completely.
And again, I think that just comes down to the practical nature of not having to flip music or have the ability to quickly change music all the time.
And I say this to my kids,
and also they have to watch where they're going.
No, also true. Oh yeah, they're much less spatially aware. That whole brain development thing. With the chamber groups again, or just groups of people, it's what I try to express to my trumpet quintet is that, when you're not staring at something and so concerned with the notes in front of you, you can also focus more on motion and focus more on the physically connecting to the piece that you're playing. Like, I'm not a huge... I move when I play solo. I think it's fair to say I move more than you do. That's true.
I don't move at all.
Not
some people actually, I've seen some judging comments on things that say you should move once in a while, and I completely disagree with that.
I think there's a limit. I definitely move more than you do, but I don't think it's outrageous. There are some people we know that move outrageously, but I think when you're memorizing something or playing with like a chamber group or even marching band, I think that actually is a good strategy for if you're trying to memorize or even just trying to get out of the notes, because you physically connect to something. And I think that's why people can do things like marching band and not forget all their music, is because they're actually physically connecting a spot on the field or a motion with what they're about to do musically.
That's right. Yeah, it's like with certain memorization of facts, you kind of compartmentalize or think things in physical locations. That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So let's go to the opposite side, because I think ultimately this issue is not a binary issue. It's not an all or nothing.
Right.
So what would be a negative of memorization?
The fear
yeah, exactly.
of forgetting. Like the fear
of
of 100% like going blank. I've never experienced that yet, but I'm terrified. Like, this is funny. Like, I keep referencing back to my quintet. Like, I want to hear that. Like, I keep referencing back to the trumpet quintet, but they're totally confident. Like, we can memorize this piece. This 7-minute piece, no big deal. Like, we've already got half of it memorized. Sometimes we play with that music already, that kind of thing. I'm terrified for them. Like, when I sit in an audience and like listen to them play, I'm scared for them. Like, if something crazy happened and like they panicked and like they went completely blank, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd be like, I don't know, like panic adjacent to them because I'm like watching them. That's a huge fear of mine in any kind of memorization.
Well, and if we put it under the context, let's just go back to the solo playing, because I think your points about chambered music are very valid.
I'm sorry, that's just like the context. I'm so sorry.
So, as far as solo playing, though, like, and especially horn playing, because I think a lot of people that listen are horn players, already we're tightrope walkers. We're acrobats swinging, across distances without a net.
Right.
Not having your music is just an extra stressor that could derail your focus.
Oof,
I think.
Absolutely.
And I've had, back when I was younger and taking piano lessons, this is like age 6 to 12, I had to do recitals memorized. Oof. And it just, as a younger student, it made me hate performing.
Yeah, I can see that.
The goal was to get through and remember all the notes without making a fool of yourself and not actually making music.
I think about when people are nervous anyway, like the first couple times they performed. I never had to do my piano recitals memorized when I was younger, but when I remember performing my first recital when I was like a sophomore in undergrad, I was so nervous because I'd never played solo before, and I walked out on stage and I never really dealt with that kind of pressure before with my horn, and I remember thinking on stage like, I don't even know if I know how to make a sound on this instrument.
Right?
Like that kind of paralyzing fear. But I was like, okay, I have my music in front of me. At least I know what fingers I'm about to put down because I can see them. And I'm like thinking of so many things. And over time, we all know we learn how to deal with that anxiety. Mm-hmm. But at first, if you're thinking about like, okay, I just walked out on stage for the first time ever, and I can hardly remember how to stand and breathe. And now I
don't even know where I am. I don't even know my name.
What is my name? Yeah, like what is this thing I'm holding? I don't know how to connect it to my mouth anymore. You like just got this sudden like paralyzing fear, and if you have to play a piece of music, it reminds me, if I were with piano, I'm so glad that we play with music. And although that's a huge imposition, like when we do our recitals because of page turns, we both like laughed about page turns before and the like many slaps that I have to do to turn my pages because they're always terrible.
Except now we're moving over to digital things, which is assuming the batteries don't die.
Assuming I can coordinate with that left foot with my right on the pedal. And I would much rather deal with bad page turns than, us playing a solo piece and I being like nervous about it, or a little like having a little anxiety about, my piano part, which always tend to be too hard. And I sit there and I go, I don't even know what key to start in.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like we'd play something like, I don't know, Peregrination. I'd start it in F, except it starts in B flat or something, or G or whatever the key is, and I'd start it somewhere so wrong. Actually, I had a piano teacher who told me that once. She said that she was playing in one of her first recitals the first Mozart sonata in C, the da da dee da da dee dum, and it starts in C, but it later on it starts in F. Like after the development, she started it in F.
Oh.
And she's like, it worked out for a little while, and then it stopped working, and she's like, and I had to stop and like restart, and I'm like, that is just a terrifying prospect to be like, I just started in the wrong key, and that's just a huge fear, is like, not only I don't even know what notes are here, but like, you start in the completely wrong place.
Well, I think we both heard performances of people who play something memorized get to that point of an impasse and literally can't restart or finish the piece.
Oh, and it's so,
and then nothing is worse than that.
I feel so bad for them, because I wouldn't even know what I'd do in that situation. And relying, like, you can say that it should be, muscle memory or whatever at that point, but in some kind of pressure situation, like a jury or a concerto competition or something that you're not just trying to already feel confident and musical, and you're auditioning for something, then that anxiety could take over, and like you said, you can't even finish because you're so worried about, am I being so accurate instead of, am I being so musical?
Right. Yeah. Which then I think leads us to, in my opinion, what the solution is, which is the middle ground, which is performing with music with a sense of intimate knowledge of the piece, where you could do it memorized, but you have the music there, which is, I think, the best kind of scenario. I mean, we all want our students to learn, and ourselves as we're learning pieces, to know it inside and out, not to know your part, just your part, but also the accompaniment. So you're not counting, you just know when to play, right? Because you know what the dialogue is. So, but yet that said, with the music there, you know that it'll be there to catch you if something happens.
Have you ever performed anything on horn memorized?
I think I must have. I do remember there was one part I was doing. It was at one of the Southeast workshop, and I was playing this. It was the unaccompanied piece, the Primary Ignition, that was for the solo competition. And okay, it's like a minute long. I wrote the piece, so I'm like, technically I could do this memorized, but then I asked myself, why? Like, what am I trying to prove? So I played it with music, and it was fine.
Yeah, I've only done it once, and it was at Iowa, when they were letting the conducting students conduct the orchestra for experience. They let anyone who wanted to play a concerto bring it in and play.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I did Mozart too. And it was, I wasn't really that nervous for it. I just remember it being like, I'm gonna try it memorized. Why not? Like, it just, who cares? It was just for fun. It was just in like our little orchestra room. We met Berlioz and so many other happenings, and I decided I'd do it, and I only had one flub. And to this day, that note still confuses me. It's on the second page, right before the end of the development. You're outlining the D da E flat C da da dum ba dee da da dum ba dee da da dum. I couldn't remember whether I was supposed to play A flat or A. I went E flat C, and in that moment it seemed to stretch about 400 years, and I was like, I have no idea what fingers I'm about to put down. I was like, in my mind, I was like,
it's gonna make a sound.
Am I gonna play A flat? Am I gonna play A? And I think I put down the fingers for A flat, and then I realized, like, at the moment the note started, like, nope, and I immediately switched it to A. Like, immediately.
Oh, I think it was the other way. I think it is an A flat, isn't it? And so maybe it was the other way around.
Dee da dee da da. Okay, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe I put it down for A.
Yeah,
I don't know anymore. I really don't know anymore. So I have to now, like at that moment, I would always want music to do
yeah.
Mozart too
Well,
again.
goodness, if
Because
I was
now
playing
I've got
Mozart,
a complex about it. Like
I would probably end up playing some amalgamation of 2, 3, and 4 just randomly, like the development from 4, the exposition from 2, the coda from 3, and not even know.
The piano parts are the worst. Like if you've ever
Yeah.
like sometimes I've been doing that is I've been playing the piano to 2 and I suddenly go into 4 because it's like
Right.
really similar at some parts and I'm like, oh no, like nope, that's not what the music says. That's not
Right.
it's just funny in doing that. But yeah, I like what you said, that it should be a choice. And the other rule of thumb I use, especially because there is a tradition. I mean, honestly, if one of my students was auditioning for concerto competition and they were going to play Strauss 1, okay, Strauss 1 I would think should probably be memorized, like at least a movement. If you're going to play one movement, okay, a Strauss 1, like the first movement, okay, that should be memorized. Like we should have done that enough. That's so standard. You don't have to transpose it. It's okay, that should probably be memorized. It's not really that notey. Not really.
Right.
You know? So that I would be like, you really need to do this. But a trumpet player who comes in and goes, I want to do Tomasi. First of all, undergrad, absolutely not. I would already veto that 100%. But I'd be like, yeah, you can use music. Like I'd be okay with using music because my rule is, would I do it? Would I, like you said, I could do this memorized, but would I, in my heart, would I want to do this? Absolutely not. Yeah, you can use music, and I would fight for that. Is like, what would a professional player do?
Exactly. And so with this requirement, whenever that comes about, that's kind of my thought is, well, let's just look at what's being done. Number one, what would I do? What can I, in good conscience, enforce? And also just, what are the professionals doing? And
that's the rule and I follow. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know what? I think for something like Strauss 1, for instance, or even for ambitious Strauss 2, those are things that people like to memorize and play memorized. But beyond that, and maybe Mozart, people are using music, especially if it's newer works.
Oh, 100%.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. I absolutely, I think so.
Like I said, I couldn't even play my own music memorized, and I wrote it.
I could probably at this point, because I've listened to it and played it so many times, I could probably do like Radiant Dances memorized. Probably.
Yeah.
Maybe. At least sections of it.
Yeah, I could do that. I could do like Saga and Visions memorized.
Yeah, some of those things. Okay, so the next part of this, to anyone who's thinking about doing this, what are your tips for memorization?
Tips for memorization.
Yeah.
So the right off the bat is to know the piece so well, and by listening to it like 100 times.
Like that. Yeah, all the time.
So much. Again, you want to, and correct me if you think differently, but you shouldn't go into performances counting rests.
Agreed.
Like you should know what the accompaniment doing when you come in. It's a dialogue.
Agreed.
And so you should have that kind of knowledge, that kind of aspect of memorization.
100%.
And just by knowing it, by being able to sing it, hum it, anything like that. Learn the music and then figure out the mechanics to put to the music.
For me, what you just said is the most helpful thing is singing. I walk around listening to it, or in the car, or just randomly listening to it and singing along with it. For me, it's not so much the notes, it's knowing the contour of what I'm about to do. Because I feel like once you've done it enough that you're about to, or you're preparing to do it for a performance, the fingers should automatically fall into line because you've done it so many times, right? You've done it enough. So I feel like it's just knowing what's coming next. And if you can sing it in your head, at least for me, that's the thing that helps the most, is singing, and your fingers will go along with it most of the time.
Right.
Most of the time, even with just our 3 valves. Like, it becomes almost a dance, as long as you can.
I'm thinking of the third page of the Glier right now and how much time I spent on that one. the B major.
That's a dance if I've ever heard one. Like
Yes.
knowing, like, because and also how you learn it, because you do it one way, you'll never relearn it. Like if you learn some of those little arpeggios on B flat side, you're never going back to the F side. I don't ever.
F side doesn't exist for me on that page.
No way, not at all. And I that's huge. I did the same thing. Is I just sang it and like just fingered it, but I sang it in my head and I listened to it all the time. And for some reason, for me, that helped a ton. And then the other thing I said about making like a physicality to it helped. Like imagining something, or if some people help with like some kind of imagery, that could be helpful to them too. Is like thinking the exact same thing at the exact same part can help connect it to something other than just the ink on the page when that's gone.
Yeah, or if it's like some kind of story or something like that. Any kind of quasi-mnemonic device, I suppose.
Yeah, that's my biggest tip.
Another thing too is, I mean, obviously is chunking, so working in small sections. But beyond that, like have you ever done the game like in a large group of people where it's basically Simon Says, like one person plays a note, the next person adds their own note and has to play the person, so you get this chain of notes.
Yeah.
That's an exercise I like to do. And then after the first time, we talk about the actual process of memorization and how it's not like we as humans can only memorize a certain amount of finite data, like numbers or whatnot.
Numbers are 7 digits, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because beyond that, we just start losing it. But so how we memorize music, which has a whole lot more than 7, is by groupings and patterns.
Yeah.
So like the intro to the first main phrase in Strauss, ba-dee-da-da, right? That's not just 4 notes. It's an arpeggio, B-flat arpeggio. So it's like one piece of information. So the more you can see patterns and groupings and things, the easier that aspect of memorization becomes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you in that. I'll tell you one thing that never did help me with memorization that they use in marching band when I was in high school is the like play a line, turn your music stand around, and play it again.
Yeah.
I'm like, this doesn't help me connect. This makes it like and I mean, and maybe it is like supposed to be a game or a like reward system or like a punishment or like I don't know. That never helped me. Like that never, when it was like, oh, I can play it once. Let me just turn around and memorize what it looks like with the back of the stand facing me.
Right.
For me, that never helped. If that helps our listeners, great. But for me, that was not a strategy that helped me connect it to anything except like, did I get it right or wrong?
That I equate that to you meeting someone for the first time and they say, oh, hello, my name is Ferdinand. And if you're not actively trying to do something, it's gone.
Gone. I forget the name immediately. Yeah.
Versus actually spending time and, like you said, kind of compartmentalizing that in some way, figuring out, well, Ferdinand, this person is a failure, but they also like freedom and French fries. Ferdinand. Okay.
That's what. Who was it? What wasn't it? Andy Bernard on The Office is like, I'm gonna shake your hand and I'm gonna say your name like however many times so I can memorize it immediately, and then like that's what I need to do anyway to memorize people's names.
That's
like,
right.
The first time I meet them, but then I've got their name forever. But
you're really good with that, so I think you would be natural with music memorization as well.
Music, it's not, well, like I said, I've only done it once, and I don't plan on doing it again if I don't ever have to, because like you said, professional standards with whatever we're gonna play. And hey, there are recitals most of the time. I'll do whatever I want to. We'll do whatever we want to. We make the rules.
And because at the end of the day, the question I ask myself is, are we more interested in the visual aspect or the audio aspect?
Agreed.
If you close your eyes, does it matter if someone's using music or not, as long as they play the best they can?
Agreed.
So, but sometimes people need to make things artificially more difficult. So yeah, let's make everyone memorize. No, and it's also, for other instruments, it's a lot more practical. Pianists, strings, people that have both hands engaged at a much higher rate. Like this makes total sense. Yeah. Of course, now we have foot pedals and electronic page turners, so I think that's becoming less of a viable, thing.
Yeah. But you're right. The visual aspect, like, honestly, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Unless you're trying to be some dramatic interpretive dancer as you're playing, if that's possible. The rest of us we're there for the sound.
Exactly. And I don't think professional pianists are looking at their fingers every single time to make sure they fall in the right spot. So it's not like they don't need to memorize for that aspect.
Right.
But anyway, I think that kind of encapsulates my thoughts on it. Anything else you wanted to add, or did we cover all the bases?
I think we covered a lot of bases of memorization.
Okay. Well, let us know what you think, and you dear listeners out there, what your thoughts on memorization or how you go about it, or maybe the worst memorization disaster that you ever had.
Yeah. Because that would be a fun experience. If it was not traumatic, then we'd love to hear about it, because we've certainly sat through ones that, the funniest things I think about, memorization fails is that if the student stops, or I say student because I think I've seen it most in students. I've never really been in a performance where a professional person has ever had to stop. I've never been in that situation.
Lucky you.
Okay, well that's okay. Well, maybe you can't tell that story, but I have been in too many situations where students, especially pianists, have just in a jury have just totally been under so much pressure that they stop, and it's always uncomfortable if they can't finish, but it also leads into the thought about just keep going and trying to finish out as best you can. Usually it's never as uncomfortable as it feels. Like if someone forgets a run or something, if they're an instrumentalist and it's all wrong for a second, but they keep going and catch back in somehow, it's usually not ever that bad either. So I just think about that. But yeah, no, I've never been in that situation with a professional, and like I said, you probably can't tell that story, but it's not comfortable.
No. To listen to. Well, and I'll say beyond this, just as an aside too, I mean, there's probably a lot of research and theory and things like Suzuki method, and a lot of maybe even Gordon with music learning theory about the importance of audiation and learning by rote and that aspect of memorization, but we're not going to get into that.
No, I don't think so.
No.
But anyway, well, I think that that was a good discussion, and we will be back with more topics. If you have topics you'd like us to discuss, then please let us know. We have an email, which is something that Ferdinand knows.
Well, I think you can just do kormotohorn@gmail.com. I think that's the one we use for this podcast.
Yes, please. Use that one.
You can email us there, or just reach out to us on, the various socials and whatnot. Because if you listen to this podcast, you're probably connected with us in some way, shape, or form already.
Yes, or text us or something.
Exactly. Just give us a call. Maybe we'll be recording the next podcast when you call. We can, put you on the show.
Yeah, please call in.
So, all right. Well, you all have a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you're listening to this. If you're driving, drive safe, and we will see you next time.
Bye.